Thank you very much, Professor Kawai. Can you hear me in the back? Ah, okay. Otherwise, I can use a microphone here. Mm. Um, First of all, I have to apologize for my casual attire. I'm on vacation. Actually, I'm vacation forever. I took retirement 2 years ago, so I'm no longer working. So I'm just traveling back and forth Japan. My last work was in the Netherlands, in The Hague, the place called Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Uh, I was asked to do in English. Is that okay with you? Yes, it's supposed to be. Okay. That's the relatively new international organizations affiliated to the United Nations, created about 15 years ago, um, to dismantle the chemical weapons from the world. So it's called Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Some say it's a promotion of chemical weapons, production of chemical weapons, but that's not true. We are working to dismantle the chemical weapons as part of the disarmament activities of the United Nations. Ah, it works well? You hear me better? Okay. So I'd like to talk about what I have been doing before I took retirement in two parts. I've been with the United Nations for almost 30 years or so. So I've seen the changes, or should I say evolution of the international organization and its personnel. So I'd like to speak about this, and then probably some of you are interested in joining the international organizations at later stage. So I would like to give you some hints, if I may, as to how to go about the recruitment procedure. And I'd like, personally, I don't like the lecture. It's a one-way street. So if you have some questions, just try to interrupt me anytime, and we do a dialogue, and we go like this. Okay. That's me. It's a funny name. Ere is my first name. My parents are Christians, so I think they had a hard time finding a good name for the newborn child, and apparently picked up this name from the Genesis in Old Testament. I don't know how many of you have read the Bible, but to make a long story short, the child was given to the parents. In Hebrew, they said Ehoba Ere. And so literally, my parents took that name for me. And Haru is also a funny surname, but we are from Tokyo. But probably I'm the last generation. When you look at the phone book, the Haru is just nightclubs or bars or restaurants, and we are the only family. And I have one daughter, so if she gets married with someone, probably the Haru family dies down. So I'm the last generation. Anyhow, my education is this. I had Master of Arts in Public Administration in ICU, International Christian University in Tokyo. And then I went to New York. And I was in the New York University, the law school, and I got master's degree in international law. That was 1978. And that was the time when the United Nations were doing huge conference, one of the biggest conferences in its history, called Law of the Sea Conference. I think it lasted about 3-4 years altogether, and they met in New York and they met in Geneva, and they alternated each 6 months. And I was helping a Japanese delegation, and through that connection I got the job in the UN. That was 1978, and ever since I've been abroad, both New York and Geneva. And then the beginning of 2000, we moved to The Hague, Netherlands, for this OPCW, and stayed there until 2 years ago. So that was that. So that's the summary of my life, pretty much, in 6 lines. So quite boring, is it? May I sit down? Yes, I'll do. The reason why I put some sort of overwhelming, exaggerated title, the increasing importance of international civil service in global governance. This is how I feel about today's situation. About 15 years ago, the Soviet Union, the communism, became dead, and the world started looking for the new world order. At that time, the United States was the only major power, so everyone thought this could be a monopoly of the power or the governance by the United States. But then came the 9/11, and we realized the United States is not the superpower anymore. So we have to look for the different sort of world order. And one of the scholars said, first of all, the Westphalian system is dead, dismantled, and superseded by something else. Now, this idea was promoted by somebody called Anne-Marie Slaughter. She was she still is a professor in Princeton University. And she said this, and she wrote a book on this. I give you the reference in the last when I finished talking this. She said, okay, the Westphalian system is dead, but replaced by more loose actors. Loose actors means everybody available. The Westphalian system is, as you know, is the interactions among the states, the national states. Maybe I should write this. Well, I put the Japanese. Now, this Westphalia system is being replaced by, in her word, international. Now, these international actors include practically everyone. That's the meaning of the globalization. Not only individuals who can travel and live abroad, back and forth, companies, including banks, traders, and also NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and terrorists as well. So they are the new players of the new world order. And then came the role of the international organization, because if everyone is globalized this way, there's no one to control, because their activities are beyond the state's jurisdiction. So then came the work of the international organization, meaning, the international civil servants are to be in the core of this new world order. That's the essence of the Professor Slaughter's the idea. So far, so good. Are you okay? Nod heavily. So that's the hindsight of my thinking. For instance, the global governance can consist of. I'm nervous, of course. In a democracy, you have three pillars of the branches: the judicial, executive, and the legislative. All of them are interconnected in the global governance these days. For instance, in the judicial area, the banks, for instance, in the financial area, the banks do some mischiefs, like Lehman Brothers. That creates the chaos in finance in the international level, and somebody has to control this. Or euro crisis. If we just let it be, it's going to be a total collapse of the financial system, not only in Europe but also the worldwide. So the bureaucracy in Brussels and Washington and Tokyo as well, they have to work together to control this. And this is the one area of the problem solving. And when I look at executive branch, that's also true to the international cooperation and coordination. About 2 years ago, I was driving from Paris to return home in the Netherlands, and between Paris and The Hague, there are two countries, Luxembourg and Belgium. And I was passing the Belgium. I was a little bit faster, so the flash, I got the flash, and but it was in the Belgium, so I expected nothing to happen. But about 8 months later, I got the bill from the speeding tickets actually from the Belgian government through the Dutch government, and I have to pay to the Belgium. This means today European Union has 27 nations, and these 27 governments know where I am and what I was doing. So that's the globalization these days. And in the legislative branch as well, they standardize the content of the domestic law through the work of the European Parliament, which is also an international organization. So these are the situation. When there was a Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union, the international organizations were bystander, by-players. We can never be a major player, although we did some development aids, social works, and all these things, but never been a major player. But now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the importance of the work of the organization, international organization, has been dramatically increased. That's my perception. For instance, my organization, my last organization, OPCW, was supposed to do a dismantling of the chemical weapons from the world, but also we are monitoring the chemical development of each member states. We have now 191 nations as a members, and we frequently travel to each of 191 nations to check the development of the chemical industry and the trading records between this country and that country, and what they traded each other, and we keep track of these statistics so that no country may produce the prohibited chemical weapons at any moment, at any time. So that's the situation these days. But what are the international civil servants? There are many studies and many theories and many discussions on this, but basically it's the people, it's the bureaucrats loyal only to the organization they serve. In other words, we have to be neutral and we have to be independent from external pressure. I just pick up the UN Charter in Article 97. It says the Secretariat shall comprise a Secretary General and such staff as what? As organization may require. So that is the hierarchy of the organization. On the top, we have a Secretary General, and then it's like a pyramid. Secretary General, and then we have this kind of pyramid. The immediate below is Under Secretary General. I don't know if you know Mr. Akashi, who's been the USG for many years. And then probably you know Mrs. Ogata. She was a High Commissioner for the refugees for many years, and she was at this rank. And then I think there are 27 or 8 USGs in all field. Then comes ASG, Assistant Secretary General. There are 5 or 6 Japanese who are at this rank now. Then comes directors, the branch heads, section heads, and all that. My last title was over here, director. That was 2 years ago. So all organizations have this kind of structure, pretty much. And we have to be dependent, independent, and neutral. But what do they exactly mean to be independent and neutral? The original idea was made or provided by Eric Drummond, who was the first Secretary General of the League of Nations in 1919. He thought in order to achieve, in order to work, in order to do his own work, he doesn't want to be pressured by external authority, namely other countries like France, Italy, Japan, at that time. So he promoted this independent team of bureaucrats, and that was accepted by all members of Versailles Treaty. That was the beginning of the neutral and independent international civil servants. But then again, this concept was broken only 5 years later by the second Secretary General of the League of Nations. In 1932, Japan had the problem with China, so Manchurian incident occurred, and then Japan left the League of Nations anyway. Then followed the German. In Germany, there was a huge election, the big national election, and Hitler came into power. And Hitler threatened the League of Nations if they don't follow Hitler's lines, they would withdraw from the League. And so the second Secretary General, whose name is Joseph Avenel of France, he was scared because if Japan already left, if the Germans followed, they will have, the League of Nations will have a huge budget problem. They cannot survive without money. So he tended to incline towards the Nazism. And so he started to purge the Jews and the English, or anyone who's against fascism and Nazism. And that was in the 1930s. And eventually the independence of the League of Nations was broken down by the second Secretary General himself. And so this was a big issue when the United Nations was created in 1945, replacing the League of Nations. The charter kept the same spirit as independence and the neutrality of the staff members. Um, but this clause, UN Charter, has been interpreted in a different way. And in 1968, the second Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld of Sweden, he wrote a book on this, and he said, okay, UN staff members must be purely neutral, loyal to the organization, but there are some space for the national maneuvering. The ratio would be 80% against 20 who would be seconded by the government. But at the same time, the Soviet Union has a different view. At that time, the Prime Minister was Nikita Khrushchev, and he said there may be some neutral country, but there is no neutral man. So he insisted that every staff members of the United Nations has to be seconded by their own government, which means there is no consolidated team of the bureaucrats, because everyone is always looking at their own government. And this has been a situation in the United Nations until 1980, 1990, until the Soviet Union collapsed. Okay, I so far mentioned Dag Hammarskjöld's view, but he believed in the independent bureaucrats, but Soviets disagreed. So there has been a discussion or practice back and forth, but largely speaking, until the 1990s, the UN consists of staff members coming from East and West. And I joined the UN in 1978, but even in my office, which is quite small, with 5 or 6 people altogether, we had American and we had Russians in the same office. It's pretty much obligatory. Every office has this composition. And even in the OPCW, my last the place to work, it was like that. We have 180 or 191 member states, with the United States, UK, France, Germany, Japan, Korea, India and Pakistan and Iran, and each have sort of military secrets regarding the chemical weapons. Now, under the constitution, OPCW constitution, they have to claim what they have and what they have done in terms of dismantling the chemical weapons. But as soon as the data come in, obviously some people inform to their own government. It's espionage, it's spying. Sorry. But that is the reality. And it's this kind of aspect not many people would like to talk about, but this is the reality, really, the situation. You have to live with this. So, on the one hand, we have to be honest we have to be honest to provide information and work on this, but at the same time we have to be careful about and suspicious about the colleagues' behavior, and that's that. But Kofi Annan has a more advanced view on the role of the international organizations. He's one of the rare Secretary Generals who had ranked up to the Secretary General from the junior officer. He was in human resource management when I was, so at one point we worked together. He managed to do political affairs as well, and discolonization, and so he just ranked up. Very smart guy, smart man, and able person, able diplomat as well. And he, having known there are some sort of negative aspect of information gathering, information keeping, he recycled sort of the staff member. His management style is not really to keep one person in one place for forever. He just rotate staff members from one place to another. That became obligatory. In other words, I started from New York, but I cannot retire from there. I have to experience some fields. We have offices in all over the world. So I went to Geneva, but my colleagues went to Africa, and then, to have a different kind of experience in that. So rotation became one of the key elements, which I will explain a little bit more when I talk about the recruitment process. But simply put, Kofi Annan's view is that today's working situation in the United Nations. In other words, used to be we had permanent contract. Permanent contract means you can stay in the UN forever until the age of retirement, but that's no longer true. They give you a very strict performance appraisal, and 3 years, 4 years, or maybe 5 years or so, and then you are asked to reconsider whether to stay on or not. So the UN has been changed this way, but it's a good place to work. You will be in the center of the international affairs, and you are in the middle of all affairs, finance, refugees, migration, or social affairs, development, political things. So it's a good place to consider for your future. Any questions so far? I have just rushed a little bit to what I wanted to say, but are you okay so far? Then I would like to talk about how to come into the international organization. My case is not really a good example. It was an accident. As I said, I was working for the Japanese delegation for the big conference, the big UN conference, and my name was just known to internal secretariat, and they asked the Japanese delegation if I would be interested in. I never been interested in working in international organization. I wanted to become a professor like Professor Kawai. But as you know, I am the end of the baby boomers. So we couldn't find any post in teaching post back in Japan. So my professor said, just stay abroad. It's like a Shimanagashi for 3-4 years. Then he would find me a post. But I became interested in work in the UN because you will meet so many different people in one place. People say that New York is a melting pot, but that's true. But at the same time, people live in the different corners, in Chinatown or Little Italy or Germantown and upstairs, upper part of Manhattan. So it's not really melted. Whereas in the UN, I had the Russian spy, the American spy, and also other Germans. My secretary was a Chinese. So that's really the real mix. And it's every time something happens in the international affairs, it's fun to talk about these things, and you just open your eyes when you hear the different views. When I started, shortly I started working in the UN, there was a revolution, religious revolution in Iran, and Shah was expelled, and the Islamic government was in place. And one of my friends, Iranian girl, who had a boyfriend, she just started the UNICEF job, but the boyfriend was so sympathetic to the Iranian revolution, so he went home. She left. They loved each other, but they are broken down, they're broken apart by the situation. And that kind of thing you can see on the spot. And that makes you think about international affairs. And that's so throughout my life. So that's what I can recommend you to become the international civil servants in any of the international organizations. Now, what would be the qualification to become the worker, staff members in international organizations? You must have, I listed up about 7 things. Obviously, you must be a specialist in certain field. Used to be you have to major in law or political science or sociology or something. A friend of mine had history major, diplomatic history, which concerns the history of the organizations, but we couldn't use that kind of specialty because we need somebody on the spot. But these days things have changed. Any occupations, any specialty, any discipline can work with need in organizations. Um, in my organization, OPCW, we had a chemical analyst. We have munition expert, meaning he's specialized in guns and rifles, missiles. I've never seen that kind of pin. I've never thought that kind of person to be my colleague, but that was that. The knowledge is the first and foremost requirement, but at the same time, you must have language skills. I'm not just saying English. You should have two languages, English and French, English and Spanish, or Russian, or Chinese, because the UN is a very funny organization, and that practice branched down to all organizations, including OPCW as well. The UN has 6 official languages: English, French, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, and Arabic. And you better be able to deal with 2 languages of the 6. I said deal with because speaking is, many people can speak, but they cannot write. They cannot, they cannot write. So that's would be a disadvantage. So basically, the Europeans have great advantage on this, but nonetheless, these days I've seen young people, studying master's degree in the States, and then a PhD in France or something, or vice versa. So that would be the qualification that we look for. The list I provide here is the items we will ask during the interview. Usually the recruitment has 2 parts. One is written test. We test your knowledge and skills. The rest would be in oral interview. So when you're past the written test and invited for the interview, you don't need to worry about your skills, your specialized knowledge, because we already know. But we ask for a few things. That's the beginning, the icebreaker of the interview. Then we would ask your understanding on the international affairs. This is a little bit tricky because many candidates would say, the UN Charter is great, and United Nations is working for the world peace, and I'd like to join, and blah blah blah. That's a little bit tricky because we know you just copy the UN Charter, but you must have your own view on the international affairs, left or right, doesn't matter. You must have a certain point so that we can discuss about the thing. The teamwork is probably the most important elements during the interview, because the candidates who apply for the UN job are very qualified to start with. So they are very confident about themselves, and sometimes, I'm the one, they would like to say, but there are more people above and below who could be much better than you are. And eventually, the international organization is a bureaucracy. There is a hierarchy. You have a boss, you have a colleague, you have subordinates, and you have to cooperate among them. So if you insist that you are the best, you'll be hit, you'll be crushed. So we would like to know during the interview. They pose you the quite tricky questions on this. Number 4, the hobbies. You may wonder why we ask this. We don't want to workaholic. We want to have anyone who's well balanced between personal life and the professional life. And that's important because if you, for instance, if you deal with the refugees, refugees are usually in a quite miserable situation. And if you sympathize too much, you are drawn into their situation and you get lost. And that's not good. We have a saying that you can sympathize the patient, but that does not mean you have to suffer the same disease. You have to be healthy and be able to help those unhealthy people. So we want to know what you do when you're not working. Maybe just reading or biking or playing sports, that kind of thing. They will ask. We want you to answer honestly on this. Now, the preference on the workstations, this is also tricky. It's better to start from the headquarters all the time because in the bureaucracy you have to know the what do I call the tricks of the bureaucracy, how to deal with the papers, how to deal with the hierarchies, that kind of thing. How to deal with the budget, how to make the budget, how to spend the budget, and how to deal with your colleagues and all this. These essentials of the bureaucracy can only be learned at the headquarters. So they may ask you to the field work. What I mean by field is like small duty station in Afghanistan or another refugee stations in Tajikistan. You can start. You can experience the very interesting things, but at the same time, you don't learn much of the bureaucracy. So if you'd like to really make a career in the international organization, I recommend you to start from the headquarters. You have to accept the offer in headquarters. That's my thing. The age doesn't really matter to you because there is a age limit of 51 for the young junior officers, because some people keep changing a job elsewhere and then try to end the career in international organizations, which is fine, but for the junior officer, 51 years old is a little bit too much. You can do better. And the last one, gender. Today the majority of the audience is the ladies, so I don't need to mentioned this, but in the UN or the international organizations, the ratio is quite high for women. Used to be, we justified this as a Japanese social structure. The Japanese business world is very male-oriented, and women, ladies do not have much chance for the promotion, so they tend to go abroad, joining the UN. But that's still true. But it's been changing. There are more and more good men, the boys, who joined the organizations, and also there is a nature of the organization as well. The OPCW is basically a military organization to start with, because we deal with the chemical weapons. So we have soldiers, we have a military men who happen to be males. But in some countries, even in the military, there are many ladies. So this ratio is, I mean, a gender issue is always the issue in the international organizations. So these are the things we ask, we discuss with the candidates during the interview, which is about 45 minutes to one hour. So then you get offer, you start the new life, which is fun to me. So that's that. Any questions, comments? Did I make it clear? I mean, there is a recruitment center in Gamsho in Tokyo that will help you, supposed to be helping you to find a job and check your qualifications and make recommendations or try to help you out. But that center is not too helpful. It's been there for about 30 years or so. But they know the information, but they don't lobby you. They don't, work for you. They don't push you. So you have to have a different route, which I can think of. There are two. One is a associate program. Associate program is pretty much governed by the government. So you have to go through this recruitment center anyway. But they will put you in this program and send you to any receivable organization. It's like omiai. You work for 2 years over there, and you'll find out if you like to work for this organization or if the organization likes you to take. So it's like a omiai situation. You can do this for 2 years, paid by the government, but you don't know where you'll be sent. The another one is internship. No one pays you. No one pays for you. You have to pay yourself. But internship would be helpful to make contacts, make yourself known to the organization. I had 2 or 3 Japanese students in my office, and they are offered eventually junior officers post, but they declined. Maybe they are fed up with me as a boss. But practically all organizations do this these days. So for instance, you go to the UNICEF site, and then you may the human resources or recruitment, and there is a column for the internship, and they talk about conditions. For that, probably the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is very helpful because it doesn't cost them. But once they got you in, it's a credit for the government, so they will do it for you. I've been working for the organization for 30-some years. That was fun, and I enjoyed it very much, and so was my family. I have one daughter. She's 18 now. She was exposed to every week or so I invite my colleagues to my house, and she's been looking at us as to how we work and how we consider, how we think of the world affairs, and that was a good experience for her. But that was my very personal impression. So I highly recommend you to opt to become a public international. It doesn't make much money. That's probably the hiccup of being international civil servants. But you can practically go everywhere in the world as you wish, and see and experience the world.